So, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from today. We are very glad you are here with us. Welcome to the final session of our HR webinar series for 2025, brought to you by your trusted partner in public sector HR, CPS HR Consulting. Today, we're diving into enhancing the candidate journey, presented by CPS HR's team of recruitment experts, Fatima Nukic and Eric Von Savage. We've got an exciting session ahead, but before we jump in, here are a few housekeeping notes. So today's webinar is being recorded. I repeat, today's webinar is being recorded and you'll receive an email tomorrow with the link to watch the replay. You will also find the recording on our CPS HR webinar page. Our slides today are very limited, so we will not be sharing them, so please watch the recording if you would like to replay any of today's session. Everyone is in listen-only mode to help keep our audio crystal clear, and we encourage you to use the chat to connect and share ideas throughout the session. If you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to drop them in the chat or use the Q&A chat bot in the bottom here, and I will be filtering them through the session. Now, without any further delay, I'm going to hand it over to Fatima and Eric. Take it away.
Thank you, Marissa. Appreciate it. Thank you,
Thank
everybody,
you.
for joining us today. As Marissa has already introduced us, my name is Fatima Nukic. I'm one of the executive recruiters here at CPS HR Consulting. I've been with CPS for about 15 years now and recruiting for about 10. And I'll give Eric a chance to do a quick intro of himself.
All right. Well, thank you, Fatima. Eric Von Savage. I have also come from a public sector background. So really all of my background has been working in a variety of different capacities in HR, including recruiting, and currently am one of the executive recruiters at CPS HR as well.
So we're going to take you through the journey that is enhancing the candidate journey. We want to touch on some musts when it comes to recruiting and making sure that the candidates are also included when we think about how to best recruit for open positions. And I will dive in with our first slide. You're impressive, but so are others. We want to make sure that we highlight what it is that your organization brings. We want to make sure that we sell the organization to the candidates as much as we are trying to sell the position to the candidate. We want to make sure that we are focusing on the organization as a whole when we are doing our outreach efforts and advertising, including the size of staff that they might need to oversee, the budget, and what the reporting structure will be should they be offered the position. So who are they reporting to? How many direct reports will be reporting to them? What will that day-to-day look like for them? Not just focusing on the minimum qualifications when it pertains to what they need to bring to the table, but also what the organization, what the employer will provide for them and give that extra incentive for that candidate to apply to the role. And then something maybe that we are sometimes overlooking is adding those key challenges and priorities that you as the hiring manager, the recruiter, are wanting to focus on, or you want that candidate to focus on should they be offered the position, so that they have a better sense of what they're looking for, or what the expectations are of that candidate should they be offered the position and start in that role. It helps them know exactly what they are walking into with the organization, but it also gives them a chance to see behind the curtain of what is to come in the organization, what their what some of those drivers might be, and it can help sell the position and the agency as a whole. And then, of course, we don't want to forget to share and even overshare those, like I mentioned earlier, the minimal qualifications. What is it that this candidate needs in order to be a qualified candidate for the position, such as education, certifications, and any type of experience, may it be 1 year, 5 year, 10 years in that related field that you're looking for, so that when candidates are reviewing the job description, reviewing the job posting, reviewing the brochure, they can be assured that they are actually qualified for the role before they apply to it, making sure that they're not wasting their time, but they're also not wasting yours as a hiring entity. And then once again, being very specific on deadlines and what those application instructions are. Sometimes, especially with public sector, there may be more than one step that needs to be taken in order to be a qualified applicant for a specific role. May that be, having to add a, statement of qualifications, having to add, a certain number of reference letters to their application, having a cover letter, having references included in that application. Maybe, some recruitments also require candidates to take exams. Making sure that all the required application steps are included in your posting and your ads will give you the best advantage of getting to those candidates, but also making sure that the candidates are aware of what they need to do in order to be successful in applying to the role. Sometimes those steps can get lost in translation, and candidates think that they applied for a role, but they missed a critical step, and so they were disqualified, not knowing that they were. So we just want to make sure that we spell out each step as best as we can when we post jobs. And then this brings me to my next point on the slide is, to keep, try to keep the process as simple as possible. But, as we all know, sometimes we just can't do that. Depending on the agency that we're recruiting for, the agency that we are, the hiring entity at, depending on the agency, you might have rules and regulations, policies that you cannot change. So just going back to, just being clear on what the instructions are if your application process has multiple steps for candidates to have to go through. And then providing contact, a good contact person for technical issues that they might face during the application process. Being able to have somebody who will answer the phone if they're on page 3 of the application and for some reason it won't submit the application. Being able to jump on the phone and call somebody, and that person will answer and be able to assist them through that process. Because we all, I'm sure, have been there where we are trying to apply for a job and the application process is, lengthy, and here we are almost done, and then something goes wrong. And now all of your information is nowhere to be found. And it can be frustrating. So we just want to make sure that if, candidates are going through that, if they are experiencing issues, difficulties with it, or if they just have questions about the submission process or questions about the position itself, that they have somebody that they can reach out to either by phone or email that will be able to answer those questions and walk them through the process. And of course, respond quickly to candidates' inquiries, being able to, respect their time as much as, us as recruiters, we want to respect our clients' time always, but we also want to be sure that we respect our candidates' time, responding to their inquiries in a timely manner, giving them updates as things are happening in the recruitment that they applied for, providing them with as many notifications as needed as things are changing, especially if things change within the recruitment process that might impact them and the timeline, to just be mindful of that and to keep them in the known, and not just keeping them, guessing and not responding to them or reaching out when necessary. And I already discussed this, just making sure that when they do apply, that confirmation email really is important for candidates. They want to know that first off, they want to know that the application went through, right? Being able to get that confirmation email reassures them that, okay, perfect, I did everything I need to do. Now it's on the recruiter. Now it's on the hiring entity to be able to review my information, and they will be in touch with me on or before the deadline. And I encourage you to put in your questions into chat if you have any. As we are talking to, we'll be happy to answer any questions as they're coming or as they come up, so that, or you can wait until the end. We'll have some time for questions as well at the end of the call.
Yeah, and Fatima, I would just say on that slide, when you're talking about the key challenges and priorities for the role, that is a great opportunity, really, when promoting the position, to communicate to those candidates what they may need to highlight in their background, in their experiences. So, I think it's important to really be transparent about what those priorities are going to be in the role. So if the organization is going through a restructure, it's perfectly helpful to the candidate if you tell them that. So if that's one of the priorities, is that if they are considered for this position and this role, they're going to be doing a restructure in a particular department, then they know that that will be one of the jobs that they would need to do, and they can speak to whether or not they have any experience in their background on it. Or if the organization is going through growth, or if there's a need to implement like a new ERP system or something like that, it's just helpful for the candidate to be able to know what those things are that are going to be those critical priorities of any role that you are promoting and recruiting for. And typically they're going to ask in the process. So it's a good idea to kind of know what those priorities are going to be up front and be able to articulate them and share them with the candidate so they can be well prepared for your hiring manager questions.
Great points, Eric. Thank you. Yes, as the more information you can provide to the candidate, the better for you and them. Because if, like I said, at the beginning, we want to make sure that we are selling the opportunity to the candidate, but also the organization to them. And it's a two-way street.
All right. So exceed expectations even with the smallest details. Here, we really just are focusing on the fact that both your candidates as well as your hiring managers, if they are unfamiliar or they're a new manager, are really interested in knowing what the timeline is going to be, what to expect in the process. And so you want to share that with them, particularly with your candidates. If you're able to share with them, where the process is going to include two interviews or two rounds of interviews. One interview will be a panel. The second interview will be more of a discussion. So the more you can kind of know what that process is going to look like, or what the timeline is going to look like, and share that with the candidate, the more the candidate can anticipate and help you if they have anything coming up in their schedule as well. It also helps them just kind of prepare for what to expect as they go through the process. So having a real clear communication with the candidates about timelines, that doesn't necessarily have to be something that you put in your promotional right out of the gate, or your ads, or on your website if you don't have that information. But as you start talking with candidates and screening candidates and communicating with them about interview process, it's good to kind of be able to pencil out what that's going to look like for the duration of the process. If the candidate is missing information, and this comes up pretty frequently where they'll submit something and think that their submission was attached to all their documents, but if you're not seeing it, um, reach out to the candidate and give them an opportunity to add those documents. Or if there's something that's not clear or missing from their documents, just reach out to them and let them correct that in the process before they get to an interview. So you want to kind of make sure that you take time to review and then interact with your candidates prior to getting to an interview. Um, so I think the key thing is to just be consistent with your interview communications. So you want to make sure that you are kind of giving all the candidates an opportunity to understand similar information. And that really is important for sort of some of the equity in the process. So as candidates are going through, if you are going to do a reference check. It's fair to communicate that up front in that that will be part of the process. If you're doing media checks or Google searches on your candidates, to be upfront and open with the candidates that that is something that you will be checking. And then if you have any delays in the process, to make sure that all the candidates are communicated with about what that timeline is going to look like, even if you don't have a new date. It's okay. So like if there's no new date, but you needed to reschedule something, just letting the candidate know that we don't have a new date yet for when we're going to reschedule, but we will be rescheduling and that you'll reach out with them is a way to kind of do those extra little details that are really important to people and keep them engaged in the process. Um, So I think also when you're communicating with candidates, one of the things that's really helpful is to use templates. So whether it's you're just communicating an update of we don't have a schedule yet for when we're going to schedule interviews, but we'll get back in touch with you. You can use that as a template, or if you are just soliciting information back or declining candidates who were not selected. I think it's very important to just have a standard template. You can personalize the messages. That can take a little bit of time. I know we like to use our CRMs where we just sort of send them out, but many CRMs are good at sort of inserting the candidate's name. And if you identify people by their name, that goes a long way in the process. So that's a good way to, if you have a CRM, to do that. But you can also draft your template and you can just, send an email out with by adding the person's name or customize your communication a little bit by identifying some of the things that are specific to that particular candidate. That's always helpful. It makes the candidates understand that there's a real there's time being spent on the other side, that we're not AI. I think we get some of that feedback from candidates these days that they're wondering like, hey, is there another person on the other side who's actually looking at my information as opposed to AI screening it and screening it out. So I think that's important too. I think it's important to be transparent both on what your use of AI is going to be in the process for selecting candidates or screening candidates, as well as what is the expectation of your candidates. So just be transparent about any media or any technology that you'll be using in your process. And then, when in doubt, if you are not clear whether or not you think candidates have enough information, just always send that extra communication. Over communicating with your candidates will never do anything but make them feel like they are engaged in the process and that you are engaged in the process. So I think, it's helpful to just make sure that as many touch points as you can have with your candidates along the way, That's important.
There. And yes, I can't stress enough the, the personalizing of the messages. Adding that name does make a difference to candidates. It it you know it adds that personal touch and it makes them feel seen and respected. So if there is a way, I encourage everybody that is in recruiting, a hiring manager of any sorts to take that time and personalize their messages when they're going out to the candidates. And then declining candidates respectfully. I had where a little side story here. I was, getting to the end of recruitment, and I had to send out the, unfortunate, thank you, but unfortunately you have not been selected to move forward in the process. And I had one of the candidates that did not get selected give me a shout out on LinkedIn saying, how much he appreciates being notified that, unfortunately he was not selected, but at least now he knows that, the recruitment is over for him, and, he can move on and he can explore other options and look at other opportunities that might be beneficial or of interest to him. So it is so important to not just communicate with the candidates that you want to move forward in the process, but also, show, the respect and give thanks to the candidates that, took time and effort to apply for the role and ended up not being selected for the opportunity. And not just, leaving them hanging and in limbo, and not have any type of communication sent out to them. And then this brings us to our next slide. Is don't forget it's a two-way street. As we talked about this at the beginning of the webinar, it is important to remember this. Yes, we are the hiring entity. We are the recruiters, and there's just one of us, one position for the most part, and so many other, so many candidates. But we want to make sure that we are, we still make that, good impression, that good first impression. If you are interviewing, doing panel interviews, to make sure that you are on camera as well. If you are requesting for the candidate to be on camera, we want to make sure that we are respectful in that sense. If there is a panel interview, to make sure that all panel members are on video if it's a virtual interview. If, like I said, once again, if the candidate is required to be on camera, it is best practice for the interviewer to be on camera as well. And then give clear instructions and direction for in-person interviews. Make sure that once again that oversharing comes in. We try to we try to call the candidate, get them set up with the time, date, location, but then we will also follow up with an email with everything that they might need, parking instructions, any kind of maybe delays that they should be aware of, if there's any construction around the area that they're interviewing, to so that giving them a heads up that they might need an extra 5 to 10 minutes for parking. That really makes a difference, because candidates are already stressed out as is when they are about to go into an interview setting. So anything that we can do as the recruiter, as the hiring manager, to kind of alleviate some of that stress is beneficial to both of us, but then also the candidate. We want to make sure that the candidate puts his or her best foot forward when it comes to the interview. So anything that we can do to help will benefit both parties. And then
sorry, we had a question come in.
Sure.
Someone asked, should we allow candidates in Zoom interviews to take notes?
Um, yes. I mean, if notes, and when and please correct me if I am not understanding the question or misunderstanding the question. When you say notes, are you referring to them taking notes on the question that was asked? Maybe they're just, jotting down notes on maybe it's a two-part or three-part question, and they want to make sure that they are capturing all of the parts so that they can answer each part accordingly. If that's the case, we always encourage folks to have a pen and paper ready, especially in that virtual setting, just because sometimes it is, there is that disconnect. But I haven't had any issues with that being an issue or that becoming a problem. So I would say short answer is yes, it's recommended. It's okay from a recruiter standpoint. We've had issues with AI being used. That is a different, that's another thing that,
Yeah.
maybe we can do a webinar on just on that part of it. But, if they're just jotting down notes to help them kind of keep track of what they're saying or keep track of the answers or the questions that are being asked, that is totally okay, because that would be okay in a in-person setting as well.
Yeah, maybe to kind of follow up on the piece that you brought up, Fatima, about AI, it's actually okay to set what your policy is going to be about AI use in the
Mhm.
interview process. And you can do that a couple of ways where when you do the invitation to the candidate, for example, you might add that as part of the communication that you're sending them via email or the tool that you're using to communicate their schedule for that interview, where you say, here's our AI expectation that candidates present themselves and answer their questions authentically, and that during the interview process that you do not use AI to assist in answering questions. Or you can just verbally state that ahead of each interview and sort of add it into your process. So similar to
Mhm.
how part of your process is we're going to do introductions of everybody who's here on the panel. Then you would just include that as part of your introduction part and part of your process for
Yeah.
setting up the interview.
Yeah. And yeah, once again, yeah, that being transparent and as Eric mentioned, having those guidelines for candidates so that they know what's acceptable and what's not ahead of the interview process, especially if it's a virtual setting. I hope that answered your question, but if you have a follow-up, please put it in chat.
Thank you both. We actually do have a follow-up we have two separate questions if you guys are
Sure.
ready. Okay. How can you tell if AI is being used by the job candidate in a virtual interview? And then, we'll answer this one first and then we'll get to the next one.
Okay, so that one is a little tricky, right? So what we have noticed, and once again, this is all uh, how can I put this? So AI is very tricky. So we're still learning. It is new territory for a lot of us. But what we have seen in the past is if people are on Zoom and the question is being asked by the panel, they will do a quick look to the side and it will look like they're reading off of something, and it just you know some of it is very obvious that they are using some type of notes, some type of gadget, but then now we're getting into that proof aspect of things. So we just want to make sure that we are not accusing anybody of anything, but then also being vigilant and looking at those cues and looking for some signs that AI might be used in the process. But like I said, we need to make sure that we don't accuse individuals of things that we're not 100% sure of, and for that to not impact the outcome of the recruitment. So and I'm sure that this is going to be a part of recruiting in the near future, is where we can better assess some of those AI uses. But for right now, it's just a matter of just paying attention, looking at, some cues that the candidate might be presenting. But at the end of the day, if there is no proof of AI being used, it cannot affect the outcome of the recruitment. Eric, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, my experience with some of that is that I've certainly had candidates um, who do appear like they are reading things, and that would be one way that you may be able to um, identify candidates that may not necessarily be answering the question authentically. Uh,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it's sometimes also just the context of how they answer the questions. AI is typically it gives very high level answers to questions. And there are some apps specific for interviewers to use when they're trying to answer questions. But I think it still goes back to making sure that you're asking for experiences from the candidate
Mm-hmm.
so that you know that they're providing you examples that back up what they're saying that they've actually engaged in.
Yeah,
Because AI is going to give you an answer that's sort of
generic.
this higher level and very polite sort of
Mm-hmm.
um, answer to any of the questions.
Yeah,
And I would really just go back to that's where it's important to communicate to the candidates up front what the expectation is during the interview process, particularly when doing a Zoom or a virtual interview, because it's harder to tell, right, than if you're in person. Is to just simply say, it is our practice that we do not use AI assisted systems for in the interview process. And so we request that you do not use any of those, that your answers be authentic, that they speak to examples and experiences that you have in your background to provide us with as much knowledge as we can about who you are. And so just doing that, I think, is really helpful when you're trying
yeah.
to work around some of that AI stuff.
Right. And then, of course, having multiple interviews, maybe they can use AI on one of the interviews, but, if there's multiple interviews that they have to go through before being selected, it gets harder and harder, especially in person. There's no way to utilize, those types of apps to help them answer questions. So um, that's why we have, uh, multiple steps in each recruitment process so that we can do the screenings, we do the phone interviews, we do the Zooms, and then we do the in-persons, and then even maybe an additional final interview with the hiring manager, just to make sure that we covered all of the aspects of the candidate. But then also going back to that two-way streets, the candidate has a chance to ask questions, meet with staff, inquire about the agency, and get those questions answered. um, and Marissa, there was a second question, I believe, that was asked.
Yes, it wasn't a question, it was actually a comment, but we're getting good
Okay.
feedback in the chat from it, so I'll just say aloud if you have anything to add to it. Amy said, in oral exams we conduct by Zoom, we put the questions up one by one on the screen to help candidates keep track of long or multi-part questions.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And we do that too with our Zoom meetings. We try to add those to our chat feature for the ones that are, lengthier, but for the ones that have just one part of it, typically those are not needed to add. But sometimes, me personally, I sometimes like to add notes to my paper, even if it's a short question, just so that I can get my brain going. Sometimes that pen to paper will activate something for me. So I feel like it's definitely acceptable for candidates to do that. But if they're just, on their, pen and paper and just looking down for most of the interview, like writing things down, then I feel like that would definitely become an issue. But if they're still engaged and they're still answering questions and they're just, jotting down notes here and there, I feel like that should not cause any concern or issues.
One came in the Q&A. Should you also state that you do not consent to having the interview recorded?
So for any platform, we use Zoom for most of our interviews. If we end up, if a interview is for whatever reason, and typically we don't we don't record interviews, but if a host is trying to record, it would pop up on the candidate's Zoom to let them know that it's being recorded and they can opt out of it at that time. But yes, if you are wanting to record an interview, it needs to get pre-approved by the candidate so that they are aware of it. Most candidates will not have an issue with it. But some candidates, depending on where they are right now, if they are openly looking for a new opportunity, or if their current employer is not aware of them applying for the roles, might not be as open to having that interview recorded, just, of it, maybe leaking or getting into the hands of, people that it shouldn't get into. Eric, do you have anything to add in that?
No, I think you covered it. It's really that, if you are recording it, let them know, inform them. If you are not wanting it recorded, like for example, if the candidate has the ability to turn it on, although typically that's only the host in the Zoom that can do it. So it would really be whether or not you, the interviewer, is making that choice, and to just sort of prepare them. If you're planning to record interviews, I would let the candidates know in advance of the interview so that they can kind of be prepared for that, and raise any questions or concerns that they have, particularly if they have not yet like informed their employer. But also, it would help when communicating that, just to convey to the candidate what your plan and what your intended use of that recording is going to be for.
That's a good point. And going back to the slide, and we already touched on this a bit, but make candidates feel welcome. Once again, can't stress this enough. Two-way street. As much as we want the candidate to impress us, we also want to impress the candidate. We want to make sure that they feel welcome. So if they should be hired for the opportunity, you already have a good relationship with the individual. At the end of the interview process, ensuring that the candidates are aware of what those next steps look like, how long should they or will they need to wait until a decision has been made on, if they're moving forward in the process or not. And then maintain strict confidentiality, especially with higher, executive level of recruitments, be um, be mindful to not share candidates' information with just anybody. Those candidates are, for the most part, already in, top level positions, and they are not sharing that they are looking for other opportunities. And we want to be respectful of that, and keep their candidacy confidential as long as possible. I understand that there is times where they will once they are finalists, if they have, board interviews or they are meeting with the city council, at that point, those names will be released. But we want to make sure that as long as we can to keep those names, confidential, for the candidate's sake. And then, that ties into the next bullet, protecting candidates' current employment. There's no need to share candidates' information unless there's a, public records, request or, something along those lines. But if we don't need to share it, we shouldn't. And then if there is a public records request that was submitted, to notify the candidates as soon as possible to let them know, hey, this is what happens. This is what happened. Names will be released on, 2 days from now. Just wanted to give you a heads up to let you know that this is coming, so that they're aware, so they're not sidelined or blindsided, I should say, that their name might be out there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, treat them respectfully. They might be future colleagues. We want to be sure that we have that, first good impression, and that we start building relationships at that interview stage, because they might be future colleagues. And remember, you're being interviewed too. If you have the time, please try to have candidates have 5 to 7 minutes at the end of the interview to ask questions of the panel, and of the hiring entity, just so that they have a chance to, ask questions that might be pressing for them at that time about the agency, about the position that maybe, weren't answered previously, and just to have that conversation with their potential, direct reports, or with their potential future boss.
All right. Okay, so this is the fun part, right? So when a recruitment is done is really when you've gotten a yes from the candidate. And so lots of folks don't like to talk about money, but I think hopefully everybody's getting a little bit more comfortable with this part of the recruitment. I think that there were a lot of states that were mentioned of folks attending today who have state laws that require posting a reasonable range, and being upfront with candidates that you're planning to use in the hiring process. So that this is a changing area a little bit, in that I think we're preparing as recruiters from the very start of the recruitment about what the salary is going to be, and we are much more transparent with it, which is a good thing, right? Because candidates talk about it, employees talk about it, they're going to learn kind of like what's happening internally within the organization. So I think it's really important to be clear about what your hiring range is when you get that posted. And then it's really okay to just simply ask your candidate, as you're narrowing the candidates down and you're getting closer to that final interview, ask the candidate what their salary expectations are within that range. And candidates will usually have an idea of what that is for them. They may have a minimum somewhere within the range for them to be able to accept the job, because they might already be getting paid somewhere within that range. So it's helpful as the recruiter to ask the candidate so that you can answer that question to the hiring manager and to the organization. And as you're looking across your own internal equity for similarly situated positions. So just ask them, and then know what the maximum amount is before you go into the negotiation, so that you know where your drop off is. I think different organizations will have different standards where they don't hire above, for example, the midpoint of a salary range. So it's important to know that going into the negotiation with the candidate, especially if you're doing this part while you're checking references and background checks, because this is sort of where sometimes somebody might decide to withdraw. So just know what that maximum is, know how flexible your organization can be, understand what that internal equity is and how much, which will have a little impact on some of your ability to have flexibility. And, in the public sector, our wages are public, right? So there's no point in lowballing a candidate. You want to pay them fairly. You want to get off to a good start with them. So you can leave a small wiggle room, is what I would say, but be be as generous as you can be. If you have a very formal process for establishing where within a range you will set something, then that will limit some of that flexibility. But just knowing that the salaries are public, um, everybody's going to know. So your candidate, if hired, is going to know, and they can, in many states, go out and compare what they're being offered to other similarly situated positions within the organization. And so be prepared to have those conversations around if this is an executive position, for example, why is the pay range different for this particular position versus another, and be able to have some of those conversations. If you're able to conduct your reference checks after you've done a contingent offer, that's generally a best practice. So as you're kind of working through the pay pieces of it. And before you conduct the references, just let your candidates know up front. This is the time and this is the moment where I'm going to go out and we're going to start checking references. That way they have an idea of when their references are going to be contacted, and they can reach out to them and let them know. And or if they haven't yet informed their current employer, they will know that they can, then it's time to go do that. One thing else that I would say is when you're negotiating and doing those reference checks, which is one of those sensitive areas, sensitive times in the recruitment process where a candidate might decide to withdraw or the offer isn't what they were hoping for. Um, if you have the option, if the pool is good and you have an alternate candidate, then, have a plan B. Have a alternate candidate ready in the event that the salary, as flexible and as far as you can go, isn't going to be enough to get the first candidate that you selected on board.
And then,
Sorry, Fatima,
lessons
before
learned.
you move
Okay,
on,
yeah, go
quickly,
for it.
there are a few questions about
Sure.
the past slide. Um, how do you handle the salary portion when you have a specific amount with no wiggle room?
Mhm.
Yeah. So if you have, like, for example, some organizations will have either a sort of calculator, if you will. That's been a practice to sort of mitigate some of the biases in pay practices. Uh, it's usually formulaic. It's built off of like certain criteria, and it lands a person in a certain place, then in those cases, I think it's important to share with the candidate what those criteria are. Um, and it is an opportunity for the candidate in those circumstances and for you, the recruiter, to talk a little bit about if they had missed anything or didn't include something on their resume or their application that could be considered for part of that calculus in the pay. If you have simply just one set amount, and that's just where you start all people in that particular position, then I think again, being transparent about that with the candidate, saying this is the rate of pay, and this is what if we offered this position to you. This is the rate of pay. So, and sometimes the best place to affirm that, because we still, as people, as candidates, have an expectation that everything is negotiable, right?
Mm.
And if it's not negotiable, I would recommend maybe having that conversation earlier in the process. If you have one rate of pay, before you bring the person in for a virtual interview, you basically have narrowed your candidates down at that point. And before you set up and schedule that interview, talk about pay and talk about the fact that this particular position has one rate of pay right up front. So that way they know whether or not to invest their time, and so do you.
And ask them about their salary expectations prior to getting that, prior to that interview. And if those salary expectations are above what that cap max is that you can offer, then reach out to them and have that conversation. Because if their salary expectations are at 110,000 and you can only like the max you can do is 100K and there's no wiggle room whatsoever. That candidate needs to know that. But then also you want to make sure that you don't get to the point of, sending an offer letter and that candidate and, declining and withdrawing. And now you're left, with no candidate and you have to restart your whole recruitment. So being transparent, and if there is that max number, when you advertise your range but you know that you cannot go above the midpoint, to advertise that too. So let's say your range is 100 to 150,000 but your mid is 125 and you're expected new hire is you're expecting for the new hire to be at that midpoint, to add that in under the benefits, whatever that may be, so that the candidate is aware that even though the range might go up to 150,000, they should not expect to receive anything above that mid range. And if that's not something that they are willing to accept, then they that can be their tell not that is not the opportunity for them. But going back to our first couple of slides, it's that transparency and sharing and oversharing everything that you could possibly with the candidate, so that they're aware of all the steps and all of the things that are is offered and is on the table for them with that opportunity there that they're applying for.
Thank you both. We'll just go ahead and continue with the slides as we only have about 7 minutes left.
And then the last slide, just lessons learned for future recruitments. Ask candidates for feedback on the process at the end of the recruitment, if possible, so that you can gather that and use it to improve upon your process as a whole. Also, if it's positive feedback, to make sure that that continues as is, or even improve upon that, just so that we want to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes over and over again in recruiting, and that will guarantee a better outcome the next time, regardless of what that recruitment may be or for what job title. Sometimes getting the feedback from candidates, is crucial, and implementing that feedback will make for smoother recruitments in the future. And then when candidates withdraw, it is okay to ask them why they decided to withdraw their application. They don't have to answer, but you as the recruiter, as the hiring entity, are able and encouraged to ask that question, because it might be able to, help you with your current recruitment that that they withdrew from, but also with future recruitments if it's something that is agency specific, organization specific, salary, benefits, whatever that may be. And then if you are the recruiter and not the hiring manager, share that feedback with with your client, with the hiring manager, just so that they're aware. Sometimes if we get, feedback from multiple candidates that, the salary is low, or, location is an issue, or, housing cost is an issue, we want to make sure that we share that stuff with our clients so that they're aware of, the things that are, quote unquote roadblocks for these candidates, that are qualified but are not applying because of that XYZ reason. And then providing candidates with feedback on on their resume, on their interview performance. If candidate is asks for feedback on their performance or why they didn't move forward in the process, we always make sure that we take the time. It's a 5 to 10 minute phone call or an email that we can do, and just to give them some pointers and some feedback on what they can do to improve their chances next time. And it really makes a difference for the candidates in their not just in their future applications, but it also builds that that relationship. So that candidate might not be the right fit for your role currently, but a year from now, maybe that is the exact candidate that you need for that role. For whatever future role may be opening up. And then making sure that we don't leave candidates not just in a black hole, as we call. We want to make sure that we acknowledge their application. We want to send them thank you emails, even if they're not moving forward in the process. We don't want to just leave them hanging and not communicate with them if they're not the right fit for the role. Once again, it's that building relationships with potential candidates, maybe for future recruitments, maybe not right now, but if you just leave candidates without an update, they're much less likely to apply again in the future for future recruitments, even though they might have been better fits for those types of roles. And then let me just go through all of this really quickly because we only have 2 minutes, but make sure you capture, lessons learned, that they don't get lost in translation. If you are the hiring manager, but you feel like you've learned something on a recruitment that maybe other hiring entities in your organization would benefit from, to make sure to share that information with them, and just be transparent about processes, and talking to the HR department if you feel like there is some ways to improve on recruiting and hiring, and just because it's and maybe you had the same issues another hiring manager had, and now you brought it up and you guys can problem solve together. So it's just a matter of communicating, learning from past recruitments and putting that towards future recruitment success. And questions. Sorry, the last slide was a little fast, but
No worries, Fatima.
clock is ticking.
As we are at the close of our session, we won't have time for questions. However, if anyone has any questions, you can put it in the survey at the end of the session and we will get back to you. But I will do my closing and let you know how to get our replay. So thank you, Fatima and Eric, for being here today. Greatly appreciate everything you discussed and presented with us today. I'm sure everyone,
thank you, Marissa.
of course, has some great takeaways from that.
Thank you.
So just a few
Thanks,
reminders.
Melissa.
This session was recorded. You will receive an email tomorrow with the link to the recording, and you can always find it on our website at www.cpshr.us. At CPS HR Recording, we are recording. Excuse me. At CPS HR Consulting, we're proud to support public sector agencies with services like recruitment, training, test rental, and much, much more. If you're looking for strategic HR support, we are here to help. And finally, we'd really appreciate it if you could complete that short survey that will pop up at the close of this session. Your feedback helps us make future webinars even better. Thank you again to our presenters, and thank you to all of you for spending time with us today. Have a lovely Thanksgiving and a happy holiday. We will see you in January for our next session.
Thank you, everybody,
Thank
for
you.
joining.